Welcome to the Nine Podcast, where we take a look at topics that crop up around our work in insight and strategy. Here, we are learning more about what it means to be human and how to improve the human condition. So we're back, and at least for the foreseeable future, I really do just want to stick with this topic around the feminine and its relationship to gender and how that is affecting the way we live, the way we work, the way we relate with each other. In particular, we just came upon this news item. Depending on when you're listening or watching this, it might be something that is faded from memory, but specifically, we just heard that Elizabeth Warren dropped out of the race, and prior to her dropping out, there was Kamala Harris, and I think there is a growing despair that is coming up from the ranks of females across the United States who have looked to the presidency as a real brass ring. If only we could have a female in that position of power, in that position of leadership, that would really show the rest of us that this is possible. And so every time, I think this is what's happening, every time we see the females exiting these races, whether it's every 2 years with the local elections, local and state, or whether it's the national elections, I think there is this sort of wave of like, oh, we're still not there. And I think there is a sadness that's very much connected to gender equality there. But I think there's actually a bigger story. Maybe no surprise given what we've been talking about. I think that, when our culture sees a woman exhibiting masculine traits, that is to say, speaking up instead of sitting back, listening and reflecting, or if a woman asserts herself in moves into action instead of just being, when we see that coming from a woman, there is something that feels uncomfortable, and especially on a big stage, culturally. There is this sort of implicit discomfort, and nobody really knows how to talk about it. And what I want to do is actually not run from that discomfort. I want to turn toward that discomfort. I really want to look at it. And I think I have this idea that perhaps when we see those masculine traits come up in women, I think it actually shines a light on how uncomfortable men are exhibiting feminine traits. And I think we see this all the time. And it makes us very uncomfortable. There's not actually, I guess what I'm saying is, there's not actually resistance to these masculine traits coming through women. I think the resistance more directly comes from a fear from men of what we have repressed by way of feminine traits. So what you see a lot is in positions of leadership, particularly in politics. My God, if you've been looking at the Democratic debates, the primary debates, everything is a shouting match. Everything is loud, talking over each other. There's very little feminine energy in those debates. And that's because in positions of power, we have a proliferation of and a perversion of masculine dominance. And women have figured out that if they're going to escalate into a position of power, they need to take on those traits. The sad thing is, for everyone, that in a position of power, in a position of leadership, whether we are men or whether we are women, we continue to repress the feminine. We continue to move away from being, receiving, creating and holding space for others rather than filling it up all the time. And so what makes me sad, actually, as I see some of these female candidates drop out, is only part of the bigger problem, which is that as human beings, we are scared of bringing out some of those more feminine traits. And I hope that whoever ascends into the presidency actually has the presence of mind to recognize the importance of listening, and to start to shift that balance into something that is more respectful of the fullness of our humanity, and not just a steady stream of chest pounding. That's what I hope. That's what I hope, not just in our political lives, but also in our work lives and our relationships socially. The main thing for me is that it's complicated, right? As I try to talk about it, it gets all twisted up. But the main thing is actually not an indictment of women channeling masculine traits, but rather an indictment of men who are not able to embrace their own feminine. Because men are culturally in positions of power. And we are the ones, I think, who have the most immediate responsibility and ability, capacity, to create and hold that space. And we're not doing it. That's the main thing for me, is when we see women channeling these masculine traits, let it be a reminder of what we are capable of as men to receive and to listen. Yeah, so I think it's important to look at the job as something distinct from the culture around it. The job does not require masculine energy. Our culture demands it. The job could easily be performed with an exaggeration of feminine energy, although it's probably best performed with a balance of the two. But it is that culture that forces women and men to act in a very strange, masculine, heavy way. And it's ruining politics, but it's ruining government. The whole world is suffering because of it. So, I think as we look for a way forward, it has to be the undoing of that. And that's what we can start talking about on the next few episodes, is what are the changes that we need to make. Thanks for listening to the Nine Podcast. To learn more about Nine, check out our site at ixcompany.com. Hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe and tell a friend.